that's a nice intro.
You like it?
Yeah,
Thank
that was
you.
good.
I've been wanting to do one since we started our podcast, but I never had the opportunity to look into what I can and can't put. So I figured this would be a good day to start it, considering this is our 40th episode.
40? Holy moly.
I know. It feels good to finally reach this milestone, and I figured it was a good time to break out a new intro. I don't know.
Oh, that means we're coming up on a year in a few months.
I know. It's crazy.
That's crazy.
But I feel like even though we are in the middle of our set review for set 4 right now, we would be remiss if we did not address this past weekend and going to the Atlanta DLC, the very first North American DLC.
I agree. We have to talk about it.
Absolutely. So, overall impressions. What did you think of the weekend?
So, I thought the weekend was really good. There was really one thing that kind of went wrong the whole weekend, but I don't think that was Pro Play Games' fault or Ravensburger's fault. It was just Melee did not work properly.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it kept crashing. So.
Yeah, it kept crashing, and we ended up being there way later than what we needed to be Saturday night.
Because of it, yeah.
Because of it. But besides that, I think that they did the best that they could have done given the scenario. And it was just an incredible experience overall. And I am so excited for the future of this game because of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I felt like the whole weekend was really fun to experience because you're at the very first challenge. No one knows what to expect. And you just find yourself in a room with a bunch of people who love the game, love playing the game, want the game to last and do well. And we met up with a lot of cool people, whether it was other content creators that we talked to online or even just people who listen to the podcast that came up to us or whatever. It was a really cool weekend. And I feel like, kind of going back to the overall impression of how it went as far as how it was ran, I agree with you. I feel like, unfortunately, Melee just probably didn't anticipate having 2,000 people, plus people with side events too, trying to access it at the same time. So I think it was at least nice that they had the person from Melee on site and there, and luckily they kind of got it up and running in between rounds, and unfortunately it crashed again, but nonetheless I feel like overall the check-in process I really appreciated because they did have another convention going on at this center because, I mean, if you remember, it wasn't originally supposed to be at this convention center because they didn't anticipate so many people being there. So when they had to up the event, they, of course, had to move it to a larger facility, and there was another con that was going on. And so foot traffic was probably heavier than what they thought, but I think they did a really good job at releasing a video to participants where they showed pictures, showed maps, and even had arrows in their pictures for this is where you go when you check in Building A, and then you go to Building B, and this is where you go. And that was honestly something that they didn't have to do, but they felt the need to do it, and it was much appreciated because I feel like not a lot of events would do that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, it was really nice. I mean, we were checked in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So maybe we got there at the right time. I don't know, but it was very convenient, I thought.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. What did you bring?
I brought Ruby Sapphire. Not to anyone's surprise if you've been listening over the past couple months.
Yep.
I just brought what I thought was the most powerful deck. What'd you bring?
Again, not to anyone's surprise. Steel Emerald. Been rocking that for the set championships, and it just honestly felt like something that I was the most comfortable with. I felt like a challenge is not something that I should have just chosen another deck for. Especially, I feel like at my level, it's hard for me to adapt to something completely different. So I was kind of in the groove for the Steel Emerald and kept it going for challenge.
Yeah, if you remember, I think it was probably the Saturday or Sunday before, maybe it was even the Monday before, I told you I was considering just switching to Ruby Amethyst.
Yeah. And
I was like, I probably should not do this.
and I told him, I was like, okay, so you know when people are about to go through a big event, like a wedding or something, and maybe the bride gets this urge in her to just cut bangs. Don't cut your bangs. Don't cut your bangs for this weekend. Just stick with the deck that you know. Don't go changing things out of, I don't know, spontaneity.
Yeah, I didn't even get a game in with that deck over the past 2.5 months or so. So
I don't even know why
yeah,
you.
I was getting nervous about the Emerald matchups, but yeah, we'll talk about that probably a little bit later as well. But so I just decided to try to make my deck a little bit better for that.
Yeah, well, you did pretty well.
I did pretty well. I got 12th.
Out of almost 2,000 people. That's incredible.
Yeah. You know, looking back on the day, I just feel like I got lucky at so many different points. Do you want to do a quick little recap of how we did real quick? Because I'm just starting to talk about it, apparently.
That's fine. Yeah. We can go into that next.
All right. So, first round, my opponent didn't show up, so I had a nice 2-0 win there. Plus, not only that, it helps my tiebreakers, which sets up for important things later. So I was 2-0, and then I played against the Mufasa deck, Ruby Amber, not the Mufasa deck that won, luckily. But yeah, so I played against the Mufasa deck, and I don't think that deck was very good in this set, so I won 2-0. And then I played against Emerald Steel, and that's a bad matchup. They probably made one or two misplays. Again, I won 2-0. And yeah, I just play Emerald Steel 3 times in a row at this point. I won one the next opponent, and then I won one with the next opponent again. Oh, then I play like 4 different Ruby decks in a row, 3 Ruby Amethyst and a Ruby Sapphire. I go 2-0 against the Ruby Sapphire. I felt lucky because it seemed like they were playing a little outdated version with Hades and Gaston in the deck, but they actually end up making top 8, so what do I know, I guess. So yeah. And then I 2-0'd 2 Ruby Amethyst decks and 1-1'd another Ruby Amethyst. I don't know, it was I felt like I got really lucky to have the record I did against the Emerald decks. And like it was just 1-1, 1-1, and 2-0. I just felt really lucky that I didn't 0-2 either of those because it can very easily happen. Yeah, so I end up 13th going into day 2. That's where I was seated. So going back to my good tiebreakers, because my opponent didn't show up the first round, I started day 2 on the play in my first 3 rounds, which is again incredibly lucky. So yeah, I played against a Emerald Amethyst deck. It seemed like it was probably the deck that probably should have taken me out of the tournament because they were playing just 1-cost Maleficent by Inner Times, and it was a much lower to the ground aggressive version with Pinocchios and Arthurs, but somehow I 2-0'd her. You can watch that match on YouTube somewhere out there. Actually, no, that was my top 32 match. That wasn't my... Okay, yeah. So again, reason why I felt like I got lucky. My top 64 match.
Yeah.
Third game, my opponent missed their third ink. They just missed their third ink. Another reason why I felt like I got lucky. I mean, how often does that happen? Someone just misses their third ink. And then they still were able to almost come back and win because they had like a slightly aggressive draw even besides that. I don't know. That was in the third game, so I felt incredibly fortunate. I don't know.
I feel like, okay, even though you felt like you had experienced luck throughout the weekend, I feel like it couldn't have surmounted to be the only reason why you placed the way you placed. Like, I think you got to give yourself some credit, because I don't think you're giving yourself any.
Okay, so I do think that I played really well this weekend, but I remember there was one game where I had like no inkables in my hand, and then on turn 3 I drew Fishbone Quill. I'm like, well, I guess this hand's good now. So just little things like that I felt like kept happening on the weekend. Like I said, I feel like I played well. Even like the choices that I had to make, I felt like I made a lot of good choices, but I also feel like I had a lot of luck. And I know to make top 16 you do need a lot of luck. That's just TCGs. Like there is variance, so you have to get lucky sometimes. But I don't know. It just felt like the pendulum was swinging in my direction a little bit.
Well, you also went into that weekend where you made like a specific tech for the aggressive emerald decks, knowing that you would probably see some of them to some extent. And so like you also prepared for what you anticipated on coming across too. So it couldn't have all been luck. Like it, I feel like you have had a lot of success with the tech that you made to your deck. And we can talk about it in a bit too, because I kind of want to get to the second half of this episode where it kind of turns into more of me interviewing you. And then we will end with listener questions at the end. But yeah, I mean, without jumping ahead, I feel like, okay, sure. Yes, you did see luck against some of the aggro decks, but you also went in prepared for those too. And I'm sure that you saw success with the things that you intentionally did to combat those.
I'm just saying, I beat a draw where my opponent had 3 merfolks in play in the first 2 turns, and I think that the chances of me winning that game are probably like 3% in general. So
Yeah, 3 merfolk in 2 turns is pretty rough.
so I feel fortunate to even have had a chance in that game. Although that did happen to me 2 matches in a row, so maybe there was also me getting a little unlucky there. So
And see, you overcame it.
but yeah, ended up finishing in the top 16. I feel like I actually did get a little lucky in the final match.
You got very unlucky. For anybody who hadn't seen that, go back and watch his second featured match, because you were going to win the next turn. And the only card your opponent could have played to beat you, they top decked. So
The GOAT!
they got the goat.
The GOAT's the GOAT.
Otherwise, you would have gotten that golden Mickey, and that's it's insanely unlucky for you.
Yeah. Honestly, though, looking back on that game specifically, that was probably one of the best games of Lorcana I've probably ever played, because every decision really mattered, and it came down to the wire. It was extremely close. Yeah, I lost, got a little unlucky, but I mean, it was an incredible game of Lorcana. You should just go watch the video of that, just because it was that good of a game. Actually, I think I got lucky in the very first game because my hand was just absolute garbage, but that was just that's something that I want to talk about later. But yeah, Dana, how'd you do?
Yeah, let's just say that I did not do as well as I thought I was going to. Out of the 9 rounds of Swiss, I tied in 7 of them. So that just really sucked. And then I dropped 2. So yeah, that was pretty rough. I wish I did better, but I can't even remember if my goal going into the weekend was originally to win a match 2-0. I can't remember. But now going into Chicago, I'd like to do better than what I did in Atlanta. I would like to win a round. But I think overall, I might have made less than a handful of misplays. I know I'm not extremely experienced enough to identify every single misplay that I did, but I feel like I have gotten better at immediately recognizing either during the match or right after whether I made a misplay or not. And I feel like I only did a couple of them. Like, for instance, you and I talked about facing the Sapphire Ruby deck, that if I'm on the play and I have Ursula Deceiver to play it to get their 1 jump ahead, and I had Smee and Ursula, and I was on the play and I just played my Smee because I thought it was more aggressive, and then as soon as I did it on my turn 3 when they did 1 a jump ahead, I immediately remembered, like, oh crap, I should have done the Ursula instead. And then of course the next game when I was on the draw, it didn't matter. So yeah, that was like one of the small minor things. Now, whether it made the difference of whether I won or not, I don't think there was anything that I had done towards the end of a game where I felt like it was the deciding factor of whether I won or lost. But I feel like I also got pretty unlucky in the first match I played against. It was Ruby Sapphire, and I mulligan very aggressively. And both games in that round, I mulliganed 6 of my 7 cards, and I still didn't get a merfolk. So that just really sucked. And I feel like I mulliganed aggressively throughout the day, where I think the least amount of cards I mulliganed might have been 4. But it was either like 4, 5, or 6. And I just feel like I didn't get a lot of opening hands that I was truly satisfied with. Now, I'm not using that as an entire excuse. It just, I mean, it is what it is. I'm definitely probably could have played better in some points, but yeah, I don't know. I think tying in 7 of the 9 rounds gives me mixed feelings about the 2-game format, which I'm going to get your opinion about it when I transition to more of the interview part for you. But at least for me, I know in some ways I'd be risking not getting any points at all if I just completely lose the best of 3. But I also wonder how many rounds I could have taken if there was a 3rd game. And I feel like I still have a lot of uncertainty if I like the 2-game format or not. But I know the biggest reason why they had done that was time-wise. And I'm sure it's largely dependent upon me playing a pretty aggressive deck in itself, but I often felt like I was finishing my rounds with 20 minutes to go, to where I think we could have definitely gotten a 3rd game in anyway. But I do know that there are people who play decks that go to time for the majority of their matches, and obviously they don't have time for a 3rd game, but I feel like either my deck wins fast or loses fast. It doesn't really get dragged out very long. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm just like not thinking long enough. I don't know, but I try to go with like my instinct.
I mean, that is the nature of the deck you're playing, of any Curse Merfolk deck, is that most of the time they're going to be a little more aggressive because that's what Curse Merfolk is. So I played a deck on the opposite end of the spectrum, a very control heavy deck, and there were plenty of times where I was done before you.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you can get proficient with your deck, you shouldn't be going to time that often in a 3-game format. Like, I was done with most of my rounds in 30 minutes, which would leave 20 minutes for a 3rd game. So, yeah, I don't think the time is that big of an issue, but I do like that the rounds inherently go faster because it is only 2 games. That is nice.
Yeah, it's not as taxing on your brain because you're not playing a 3rd game, but I just feel like it's very incomplete, in my opinion. I think you and I have talked about this before, but as both former athletes, we come from sports that you can't tie in. You can't end the game with a tie. You have to play it out, and there has to be a winner and a loser. And so for us, it feels very unnatural to just tie and move on. But I'm sure if we played soccer, we would think differently, but
I didn't play soccer.
Oh.
For 2 years.
That's not the main sport I was thinking. 2
No.
years. That's not the main
2 years
sport
in
I
high
was
school.
Referring to, Dalton.
I know. I would still have the same sentiment. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you want to get into the interview I have prepared for you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Should be fun.
All right. So, Mr. Dalton. Can I call you Dalton?
Yes.
That was my loose reference to The Office. Jimothy. James, may I call you Jim?
May I call you Jim? Jim, James, Jimothy.
Yep. Anyway, what was your goal going into this past weekend?
So, my goal going into this past weekend, I think, of course, I would have really liked to make top 64, but if I was going to be honest with myself, getting the Let It Go promo was like the first goal, just because I felt like I could do that and it was a reasonable goal to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
My goal, I mean, of course, I want to win the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but that just isn't a reasonable goal. So it was the Let It Go promo. That was the goal.
Hey, and you did that, plus you got more. So, pretty good. And so going into Atlanta with that goal, what was your prep like? How did you prep for an event like this?
So I probably did not prep as much as I would have liked to. It was mostly just Pixelborn, like an hour a night maybe. You know, if I had more time, I would. Or maybe it was like a pack tournament. Like, I think the whole like past 2.5 months or so has been kind of prep for this, just because that's how long I've been playing the deck and working on it and learning all the lines and being comfortable for it. But specifically for this tournament over the past couple weeks, it was just maybe an hour of Pixelborn every night. Sometimes I didn't even get to do that, but
Yeah. Having the set championships fairly close to the challenge was probably really useful for that, because you got to basically test it in a competitive setting in person, because we've talked about it before. As much as we play Pixelborn and constantly try to get rounds in, it is an entirely different atmosphere of playing it in person, because there are certain things that Pixelborn does a really great job about for triggering you to remember to do, or it just automatically does something for you. And in person, you have to remember it yourself. So it is different. And luckily we had the set championships to be able to like really grind it out in person.
yeah, definitely actually getting to hold the cards and play with the cards and go through the motions. I think that's really important to get used to. So there was a big thing with Savitz on stream this weekend where he didn't ink off of how far I'll go or something, whatever it was. And like, I don't think that was intentional. I think it's just that he's not used to playing with physical cards, because he mostly plays Pixelborn, and before that it was like Hearthstone or Magic Arena, so he just never plays with physical cards. So I think you just have to, it's just a dexterity thing that you have to get used to over time.
Yeah. I feel like we should take a brief moment to address that too. Like, I know that a lot of people were coming for him too, but I think we all need to remember the fact that he is highly watched on a featured stream, and his reputation relies upon him streaming and doing well. And so it would be very stupid of him to have done that intentionally. And so I agree too. I mean, it's unintentional to me, because you wouldn't purposefully do that knowing that thousands of people were watching you.
Yeah, also, he has had incredible amounts of success in this game and other games where cheating just wasn't possible, such as playing on Pixelborn. You can't cheat when you play on Pixelborn. You can't cheat when you're playing the Hearthstone client, and he's played at the highest levels of all of these things. So yeah, there's just no reason to believe that that was intentional.
Yeah, you wouldn't jeopardize your reputation on that, knowing so many people were watching you. Like, no one would be stupid enough to do that. So
No.
we believe you, Savitch. Not that you would ever listen to this podcast, but just in case.
We stand with you.
We stand with you. So going back to your deck, you mentioned being able to use it in person for so many things like the set championships. From our Mulligan video, you did use the same deck that you had used for the set championship, but did much change from that? I know I alluded to you making a certain tech. Do you want to elaborate on how your deck might have stayed the same or changed, or what you did to that from the same list that you had in the Mulligan video?
So the biggest change that I made was that I added 3 Queen of Hearts, Imperious Monarch, I think is, or Impervious Monarch, something like that. It's the Shift Queen of Hearts. So I came to this decision. I was just kind of debating about it all week. I'm like, this card doesn't see play. This card's not good in any deck because it doesn't see play, but I kind of wanted something that was an additional card advantage engine besides Flaversham, because you don't always draw Flaversham,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And I wanted something that was just kind of good against the Emerald decks.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I also felt like that the 2 cost Queen of Hearts is just the worst card in the deck, bar none. Like
No
it's
one's
just
yeah, no one
it's
who's
just
listened to this podcast is surprised by that because you've been ripping on her
yeah.
for weeks.
It's just so bad in so many matchups, but you have to have it for the Emerald matchup because they can just run away with the game very fast if you don't have a way to answer their Merfolk or Flynn Rider early.
Yeah.
So you have to play that. But then I just kept finding that it would just kind of get bricked. It would just kind of sit and play after it took out a Merfolk, and then I don't know, they would quest with their goat or rabbit or Ursula or anything with 3 or more toughness, and then your 2 drop that you played against your to combat their deck just didn't do anything. I wanted something to make that card a little more useful, so I was just going through the app one day and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try the Shift Queen of Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had mixed results with it, and I don't know if it was mixed just because there were a lot of times where I didn't either play the right matchup for it, or I didn't draw it against the Emerald decks while I was playing on Pixelborn.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of just decided to go with it anyway because I still felt like I needed help in that matchup, and it was actually really good this weekend. If you watch the my first feature match in the top 32 round, like it, one Queen of Hearts probably drew me 6, 7, or 8 cards. Like it was just insanely good against the Emerald decks. You kind of just play it on like turn 4 or 5 after you play like a Grammatala or something, and challenge whatever characters they have in play with your Grammatala, and instead of discarding a card and being down all that card advantage, you end up being card neutral because you get to draw a card. And it was something that a lot of people just did not see coming.
Yeah.
You would just, before the second day, deck lists weren't open, so they didn't know what you're playing. There were times where I would just play it on like turn 8 and with 5 ink, and then trade 2 characters away into their 2 characters, and I would recoup the card advantage from it. And it was just something that a lot of people didn't see coming. A lot of people don't see the shift coming on it with it as well. Like I said, to trade up into an Ursula. So yeah, it actually ended up playing out a lot better. I'm pretty happy that I put it in my deck just as a second card advantage engine, even though I mean most of the time it is ink, but the times where it comes up, it actually ended up performing really well. It kind of gives you another line against the Emerald decks as opposed to just like a turn 3 Quill and a turn 4 Medusa. You can play like a turn 3 or 4 Grammatala and then play the Queen of Hearts. Like it just gives you so many more lines against the aggressive decks that make it feel like you don't feel as punished for getting rid of their characters. And yeah,
Especially with Scar, you can just keep repeatedly challenging, unexerting, and then you're just drawing cards within the same turn like crazy.
yeah, like, and that happened on the feature match. I don't know if that's more of a product of Scar being insane or Queen of Hearts being insane, but yeah, it was good pretty much every time I played it this weekend, and I'm super fortunate to have found it, I guess.
Yeah. I know, granted, I am not comparable to anybody that you faced towards the top. However, you and I do play a lot. And whenever we had played prior to you putting that in, I mean, be honest, I beat you a lot.
You did.
Because I had Emerald Steel. But when you added that card in and we would play, it was definitely more in your favor. Because you had that ability to it was just annoyingly insane. But, or maybe I just got bad. I got worse, maybe.
You just got unlucky. I I honestly think that instead of like just going straight down on cards in your hand when you challenge a Curse Merfolk versus being card neutral, especially when you have to challenge like two Curse Merfolks and two Flynn Riders over the course of a game, and they're making you discard cards with sudden chill and what have you. Like, the cards really do end up adding up, and when you're playing such powerful cards that the Sapphire Ruby deck does, you just want to continuously draw more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it ended up working out. I'm really fortunate, and yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. So I gotta ask, how'd... Oh my god. I'm debating about leaving her in there for this because I think her meows were so pathetically funny. I'm just gonna start over. Willow! Oh, maybe I'll add this in as a blooper at the end or something. But so I gotta ask, how did it feel going into day 2, being one of those 64 players?
It felt incredible. This was one of my goals over the course of a couple years. I really didn't think it was going to happen the first challenge, let alone maybe even the first year of challenges. So it was just incredible. It was awesome to kind of just be where not a lot of people have had the opportunity to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you, honestly.
I appreciate you.
But you were featured on 2 of the matches, like you said. How did the feature matches work? Like, did they just select random matches? And what was it like going behind the curtain? I have so many questions for this. Yeah, did they just select random pairings, or...
So, I don't really know how they did it in the first day. I think the first day they were just like, who's someone popular? Let's get them back there. And I think that's what happened the first day. The second day, I'm not sure why they picked me or anyone else who would have been the feature matches. I mean, there's only so many tables in the second day, so I guess it isn't super unlikely that I got picked, but yeah, I think it might be random. I really don't know how they choose.
Yeah. What was it like going behind the curtain?
It was kind of exciting because I don't know, I've never been on a feature match before. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was a good experience. It was pretty chill. I mean, I got to be someone who I really admire, so that was awesome.
Which was?
Tanning Grace,
Yeah.
who was a professional Magic player, and now he has his own podcast and just commentates apparently Lorcana now, who did not see that coming, and he commentates a lot of Magic stuff, so it was awesome.
Yeah, when we left for Thursday, it was basically in order for us to not have to go back and forth with our vehicle. I dropped you off at work that morning, so then I could pick you up later, hop on the expressway. And on the way to work on Thursday, we were listening to his podcast. Mm-hmm. And that was before he was announced to be part of the commentating team. And then, yeah, I remembered you when we looked at that photo and we're like, oh, that's awesome. Like, Liam's going to be there, Brandon, Rebecca. And I'm like, who's this? And you're like, that's the dude that we were listening to yesterday.
Yeah.
On his podcast. And I'm really glad that you got to meet him because I obviously know that you really like to listen to his content. So it's a pretty cool moment for you, I do have to say.
Yeah, it was cool.
Did it add any more pressure to an already high stakes game? Like, it's not like it was even day 1 feature match. Like, you're close to the prize. Like, so being on a featured match, did that add any additional pressure?
I don't think I really felt any pressure from that, really. The only pressure I felt was just, I don't know, the stress of playing the game in general for the stakes that we were playing for. Mm-hmm. But as far as performing in front of people like that didn't really have any effect on me.
Yeah, I would have definitely been the opposite of you. I would have been clamming up, making stupid mistakes.
I don't know, like, I wrestled in front of thousands of people at state and high school. Like, it was just something, performing in front of people in that kind of setting, like, It's not a big deal.
You're a competitor.
Yeah.
You're like a crowd. I do wish that they would have, I mean, maybe we can talk about this later too, but I do wish they would have had some sort of screen outside of the curtain for people to watch the featured matches of, because just me staring at the opening, waiting for you to come out, whether I would see your happy face or sad face, I wish I would have been able to watch the match. But, you know, maybe it was their first one, so maybe next time. But, in the 2-game format, I know that we did best of 3. Well, we, as in I was a part of, I wasn't a part of that, but the royal we did best of 3 on Sunday. But what did you think of the 2-game Swiss on Saturday?
I'm coming around to not minding it. I think it's just a mindset thing. Instead of taking the 2 games together as a match, I'm just trying to take each game individually. So you get one game where you're on the play and you're on the draw. To me, those are 2 separate things, because I think in order to make day 2, you pretty much need to win a certain number of games over the course of Saturday anyway. I think the number was like 14. So I didn't really care if I went 1-1. My goal is just to win as many individual games as possible regardless. So that's just kind of the mindset that I'm trying to keep. Just win as many games as you can, which, I mean, that's kind of what I would be trying to do anyway. So yeah, I honestly don't mind it. It makes rounds go by a little bit quicker. I don't have to play 3 games every round, which is probably good for my mental stamina. And yeah, I thought it worked. It's probably not the best solution. It's definitely not the worst solution, but I think it works.
Do you feel like, I know a lot of people have made the comment that if you are going to do the 2-game format, that 9 rounds with Swiss isn't enough?
I do think they could use 1 or 2 more rounds of Swiss, especially since in theory rounds should go by faster. They didn't this weekend because of Melee.
Yeah.
But if rounds are going by faster, then I think we could probably fit at least 1 more in, and that would start separating some separation between like the top performers and the lower performers happens anyway in 9 rounds, but after a 10th or 11th round, that separation starts to increase, and you wouldn't see so many people on the bubble.
Yeah. There were a lot of people on the bubble.
Yeah,
like
there's
60 some.
50 or 60 people with the same record as the person that got 64th. They just didn't get to make it in. So tiebreakers were obviously really important. That being said, I don't think I want to do all 11 rounds in one day. I kind of wish they would just move 2 rounds to the morning on Sunday, just because I think 11 rounds in a day is just a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm starting to kind of dig the 2-game format. I just have to shift my mindset between it being a match and what it really is just trying to win as many games as many individual games as possible. If you have a really high win percentage in games, then you're going to do really well. So I don't know. I still think the better players will win more over the long term regardless.
That's fair enough.
I know you might not agree.
I don't, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll come around to it too, but it still feels very incomplete to me to just tie. And I don't know if my opinion would have changed if I did not tie 7 of the 9 rounds. Like if I tied 4 and then, you know, I had 5 rounds where I either lost completely or won completely, I feel like I would not have felt so yucky about it. But yeah, splitting 7 rounds was just, it sucked. I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's nice to get credit for at least, I'm trying to come around on it too and tell myself that there are some rounds in which if it's a best of 3 and I still lose, but we go to 3 games, I won a game, but I have nothing to show for it. And I know that that kind of combats it, but I still don't like it.
Yeah, you're still thinking about it as the round is a match as a whole, as opposed to the round is two separate games.
Yeah, I know.
So I think if people can, switch that mindset, which is hard because that's just not what we're wired to do after, I don't know, that's just not how card games are,
Yeah, I mean,
It's best of three or best
like
of one.
30 years of TCGs, right?
Yeah. So I just have to frame it differently in my head, and I started to feel a little bit better about it.
Okay. Maybe I'll try that for Chicago, for sure. But speaking of Chicago, do you think you're going to stick with Ruby Sapphire? Or, I mean, you don't have to tell us, but if you aren't going to stick with it, why wouldn't you?
All right. So I'm not sure. I mean, I've been kind of wavering back and forth. Right now, I feel like that I probably will stick with it just because the other deck that I would like to try, I have not had practice with yet. I have not played any games with it. That deck is Ruby Amethyst. I think a lot of people are going to say, oh, that deck doesn't exist anymore. But I think the new 2-cost Flynn Rider and the Queen's Castle are really good cards into the current metagame. That set 4 looks to be, which is Emerald Steel and Ruby Sapphire and Blue Steel. I just think those two cards look incredible. Then you still have the really consistent shell that Ruby Amethyst has anyway. So if I don't play Ruby Sapphire, it's going to be because I feel like Ruby Amethyst is just incredibly well positioned. Mm-hmm. But I definitely need to play a lot of games with it. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to stick with the same.
Yeah.
No surprise.
I think it might be the best deck in the format. So
hey,
it
finally
makes
it's coming
sense.
around. I just want to throw this in your face for a second. Set 1.
The Emerald thing.
I have you on record on this podcast of you saying that Emerald is the weakest color.
It was.
That's besides the point of if it was back then, but the point is now it's arguably the strongest. So,
Well, yeah, they gave it 3 of like the top 6 cards or whatever in the last 2 sets.
Okay,
They got
Mr.
both. They got both Ursulas and Diablo. Of course, it got really good.
After you've had B Prep, Maui, Medusa, Tremaine, shall I go on?
That's all you got. You got 4 cards.
Yeah, you're right.
You got 3 cards in the past 2 sets.
We have to play catch up.
And you got Curse Merfolk.
We have to. Shh. Hey, listen. Our deck had to play catch up to yours.
Now you got Pegasus and Pegasus.
Yeah. Hey, if anybody has a 4th Diablo they want to sell me, I gotta hope to put in a TCG order that can get here by Chicago, but we'll see. Anywho, now I'd like to transition to answering listener questions, which we just have one for this week. I know that we haven't been asking that for the past several months, so I apologize. We honestly forgot about it. So bringing it back. But this week, our question comes off of Twitter from The Illumination Rich. He asked a couple of questions that we'll break up and answer separately, but basically what were our highlights, what could be improved, and what surprised us. So starting with highlights, Dalton. I feel like I know yours, but
I got top 16 at the first Lorcana DLC.
nice. I didn't expect you to talk like that, but you deserve it. You deserve it, man.
Getting top 16 of Lorcana DLC is definitely the highlight of the whole event for me, because I mean, besides getting a Mickey or winning, nothing else could have been better.
Yeah. For me, just being able to say that I attended the very first North American Challenge, like, I know it sounds cheesy, but like I told you that one day when we have kids, we're going to use it as a flex to be like, Hey, we are at the very first ever. And then they're probably going to be like, wow, you're old.
Wow, you're old, yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. But yeah, just being able to be in attendance of such a historical event, that if this game persists as much as I really hope it does, and I'm sure everybody else anticipates it too, to say years from now that you were at the very first one is pretty freaking cool. But aside from that, I feel like just being able to finally meet so many great content creators face to face that we've interacted with online, that it was really nice to finally be able to like shake their hand and say hi and have conversations in person. And even everybody else who supports us and listens to the podcast, just meeting them in person too. Like that was a really cool moment for me to meet so many people.
Yeah, actually the moments when people were like, "Oh, I listened to your podcast," or someone who was sitting next to me during a match was like, "I watched your YouTube video of where you did mulligans." That might have been the highlight of my weekend. I'm like, holy cow, people actually listen to us.
I know.
This is awesome.
We're not just doing this to open space of nothingness. So yeah, if you were one of the people that came up and said hi, thank you so much. That honestly like made my whole weekend. And if you saw us but you didn't, honestly come up to us next time, because
we love that shit.
We love that shit. It was really cool. It was really, really cool. It makes what we put so much time in to do weekly, it makes it all worth it. Even if one person says, hey, I really like your mulligan videos, like it makes it all worth it. Just one person. So
for sure,
that was pretty cool. But what could be improved? Can I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
So I know a lot of people have already talked about this within the past few days, but I feel like the side events, and I know that this was the very first one, and I really hope that Chicago is going to be different, and even all of the other challenges after that. I hope it just keeps improving and improving. But I feel like some people who attended the one in Europe this weekend talked about how they received tickets for participating in the main event, whereas none of us did. And so it got to the point where people started dropping so they could start doing the side events to start getting the tickets to even have a chance of winning something. But I think if you give tickets out for participating in the main event after a certain amount of rounds, like it would be more an incentive for people to not drop. But I think the prizes too could probably be a little bit more attainable. And I think there should be a separated merch table, because they had hats and shirts there that were so cool. So many people wanted them, and like I wanted to buy a shirt that weekend.
Let me give you our money.
Yeah. And maybe I was coming from a place where I always went to tournaments for my sport, and it was like, oh, go to a tournament, get a tournament t-shirt. You know, like that was just a thing. You always go to the merch table and get a shirt that says you attended that tournament that weekend, you know? And so I thought that they would have that available, but unfortunately they didn't. And it kind of sucked, because if you attended the main event with how crazy the side events were on Sunday too, there was no way for me to even be able to grind on Sunday to get a t-shirt. So that kind of sucked. I hope that they change it. I think a lot of people have been making that feedback. And so I really hope that Ravensburger kind of takes that into consideration. And I don't know, me and Brandon too from B Squared 24 were talking about how it would be super cool if these kind of events turned into how Pokemon was, like both in the streams and the prizes. Like I know he mentioned how like at Pokemon ones, like they have like Pokemon plushies and just more variety of prizes that you can get other than just like cards, mat, t-shirt, hat. You know what I mean? But even more so too for the streaming aspect, I know that they had the post-match interviews, but you guys were standing up for it, whereas for like the Pokemon ones that I know we've watched, like they kind of have like a lounge area and they like sit down and it just is, I don't know. It was their first one, so I'm sure they're going to improve on it. I hope it gets to the level that Pokemon does, because I think it's really cool. So I don't know. That was just a lot of me complaining, I feel like, but I hope I feel like I
don't
had
think
good
so.
points.
I don't think it's you complaining. You're just talking about what can be improved, and that's okay. Like, I think the side events and the pricing and not having a merch table, those are all things that can definitely be improved on. Like, I wanted a shirt, you know?
Yeah, because you had to put on,
I even had to put on a shirt for my feature matches,
because he had
and
a,
they didn't even let me keep it.
yeah, they had a he had a be prepared shirt on. And yeah, you'd figure if you wore it twice, they're like, ah, you can just have this.
Yeah, apparently not. But yeah, those are things that can be improved. I think the only other thing that can be improved is, or that really needs to be improved, is just melee. Like, whatever, I don't really know how those things work, but whatever system they're running it with, it just needs to be a little more powerful, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It didn't seem like it could handle our crowd.
I mean, I know in Chicago there's only going to be 1,000 people, so that's like half. But I'm still worried that it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. If they have even bigger ones in the future, then I'm definitely worried about it crashing a lot. So yeah, I think that was probably the one thing that stuck out to me, because like I said, we were there probably far later than what we needed to be because Melee was struggling. So yeah, that's mine.
That's a good point. And lastly, what surprised you?
What actually surprised me as part of the highlights is that people actually recognized us. So yeah, that was just really freaking cool that people actually recognized us, and Brandon came over and talked to us and was like, "Hey, I love your podcast," and I'm like, "You're way more known in the community than what we are. I'm surprised you even listen to us."
I'm surprised you even know who we are.
Yeah.
No, we love you, man.
Or sitting down. I mean, Liam just talked to us for like a half hour in between rounds. Just
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that, I don't know. It was just an amazing experience. Yeah, a little starstruck, and I think that leads into what you want to say a little bit.
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised by this, but it was just how genuinely nice everyone was, which I feel like is a testament to the culture that the game is trying to create. And it was also really cool to see the co-creator, Ryan Miller, there and just hear how he was just grabbing people to sit down and play games with him, which is just, I don't know. It's super cool to hear and shows that how nice of a guy that he is.
He just seems so involved and like he cares so much, and you love to see it.
Yeah, because I'm sure that if it was another game and the co-creator was at a event like this, I feel like in a lot of cases they just might be inclined to just stay behind the stage or the tables and just kind of be unapproachable in that sense. But I feel like Ryan has portrayed that he is all about just creating a community and just getting people to play the game. Just sit down and just learn to play the game. And so I feel like that is pretty spot on to how he comes off. And to hear that he was doing that was pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And I think another side thing that surprised me, which has to do with my matches itself, I didn't play a single mirror match the entire weekend. I just find that crazy. I kind of quickly jotted down what I ended up playing against. So it was 4 Ruby Sapphire decks, 1 Emerald Amethyst, 1 Ruby Amethyst, 2 Steel Songs, and 1 Ruby Amber. But not a single Emerald Steel, which shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah, I play against 3. I wish I played against 0.
You took them all. But yeah, so overall, great weekend. I had a lot of fun with you. I'm excited to see where Continentals are going to be. We didn't anticipate having another vacation this year, but I'm here for it.
We're going.
We're going, no matter what.
No matter what, we're going. I don't care.
No PTO, we're going.
Absolutely.
Sorry, boss. Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. I'm excited for Chicago too. That'll be a blast.
For sure. Ready to see a bunch of people.
Yeah. And
Even
if you're going to Chicago, come up and say hi to us. We'd be so happy to see you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I feel like we also need to take a moment of silence at the end of our episode here to talk about Pixelborn, Got the news today. Extremely sad. Pavel, you literally did such a service to the community by creating a client where people were able to access the game when product was so scarce. So you were seriously, I feel like, an MVP for ensuring that this game reached the popularity that it got to. So many content creators have relied upon your platform, and you're going to be I feel like I'm talking about like you're leaving or something like but your involvement in Pixelborn and in the community is going to be a huge loss. But I know that that's not truly goodbye, but you know, it feels like it.
Couldn't have said better myself.
Oh, thanks. Now I'm all sad. Now I feel like we gotta savor our very last pack tournament coming up this weekend. It's gonna
there might be time for one. Probably not.
Chicago.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, so we're gonna participate in the pack tournament this Saturday. Next Saturday is Chicago. So, and then that following week it's kaput. So we're gonna try to take in Pixelborn while we can.
Yep, and get in while the getting's good.
Get in while the getting's good. Aw, R.I.P. But we will report back how our pack tournament did next week and continue our set review of Ursula's Return with Ruby as our next episode. We will try to get this out to you later in the week. So 2 episodes this week, and then hopefully we'll finish up our set review next week before Chicago, ending with Sapphire Steel. And then the week after that, we're just going to go right back to our single episodes because we're tired. Mm-hmm. Doing 6 episodes in 3 weeks is a lot. So we need to take some time and settle down. But yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, hope you guys have a good week. Hope you enjoy this outro music because you got to have an outro if you have an intro. So
bye.
Bye.